Hello everyone, welcome to the SI2 webinar for steering team members, and the focus of this webinar is goals. My name is Sue Reynolds and I'm president of the American Student Achievement Institute. So here's what we'll be talking about today. As always, we'll do a very quick review of the organizational structure and also the improvement process, so you can kind of see what we're doing today in relationship to the big picture. And then specifically today we're going to talk about goals. So we'll do an introduction to goals, kind of introduce you to the way we do goal setting with SI2. We've been developing this process for almost 20 years, and this works really well for us, and I think you'll see too that the way that we do goal setting is aligned with all the vocabulary that the Indiana Department of Education uses. We went through a major rehaul a couple of years ago to make sure that we were using the same words that DOE is using, and that will enable you to have, we think, very meaningful conversations with your outreach folks from the Department of Ed. So, we'll do an introduction. Then there's three kind of separate activities that we'll do as part of this, this step. One is that we'll ask all of your steering team members to do an individual review of the Student Achievement Data Report. So you'll just take some time to yourself and you'll be looking at all of the data that you've been entering into our system. And you'll be asking yourself some kind of some exploratory questions. You know, what pleases us about the data? What do we not like about the data? Do we have achievement gaps in our school? So we'll do that individual review. Then we'll come back as a group, as a steering team, and you'll discuss the data. You'll talk as a group. You know, as a group, what do we like about our data? What do we not like about our data? And do we have achievement gaps in our school? Are there some groups of students that are achieving at a different level than their peers? And if so, should we do something about that? So we'll give you a chance to have those discussions. And then that discussion will lead into the final discussion, which is, you know, once we know what pleases us and disturbs us, and if we have gaps, then it's time to set our primary areas for improvement. Those are very broad areas where we want to improve in. And then the most important thing is we'll come down to your SMART goals, which are very specific and targeted areas in your school that you are going to improve, and that you're committing to yourself and holding yourself accountable for improving in those areas. The other thing I wanted to mention on this slide is that if you do all of these steps at the same time, it would be kind of a lengthy discussion. We do have schools that will, you know, bring in dinner and they'll start and they'll stay for several hours and just knock it all out at once. But I think maybe the light bulbs are going off that you could probably split this into separate kind of activities. So for example, one of your activities could be to go do a quick introduction, you know, that we're going to do today, and then say to everybody, okay, go home and in your living rooms, pour over those student achievement data reports and put a plus in front of data that pleases you, and put a minus sign in front of data that disturbs you, and circle achievement gaps that you see. So those first two things, the introduction and the individual review, people could actually do in their living rooms before they get to the meeting. And then when you get to the meeting, you could say, okay, you know, after you've been looking at all this stuff in your living rooms or on your kitchen table, you know, what did you find that pleased you and disturbed you, and what gaps did you see? And then open the discussion, the actual face-to-face meeting there. Another kind of tweak on this that we've seen schools do very successfully is that the entire steering team will come together and identify what pleases, disturbs, and where their gaps are. They'll have that general discussion. And then the last discussion, they'll have kind of like a subcommittee that will take that first discussion and then say, okay, if this is what pleases us and disturbs us, and if this is where we see gaps as a big team, now let's take like a subcommittee and come in and say, okay, then what do our PAIs need to look like, and what do our SMART goals look like? So, and then that subgroup will bring back their suggestions to the large group. So it kind of depends on you. We think the more that you can involve everybody in the discussion, the better off you're going to be, the stronger your plan will be, the more focused your PAIs and your SMART goals will be, the more buy-in you'll have. But we also understand that schools have time constraints. So if it's not possible to involve everybody in that last discussion where you're actually rolling up your sleeves and digging in and saying, okay, if this is what pleases the big group, if this is what disturbs the big group, then what do those PAIs and SMART goals need to say exactly? If you want that to be a subgroup of people, that could be okay. So one of the things you'll need to decide as a steering team after we get through all of this is how are you going to work through these four tasks? Is it going to be the whole group's going to do everything, or are you going to have people do part in their living rooms, and are you going to have a subgroup that comes up with the PAIs and SMART goals and then puts them out for consensus to the steering team? That'll kind of be up to you. But again, remember, the general rule of thumb is that the more you can involve everybody in the discussions, the better your school improvement plan is going to be, and the greater likelihood that you're going to have to raise student achievement. So, but that taken with a grain of salt, because we also know that schools don't have unlimited time. So, okay, let's go on. So that's what we're doing today. Let's go and start real quickly with this review. One is just looking again at the organizational structure, just reminding people that you have different types of people on your steering team. These are your worker bees. Their job is to manage the process of school improvement. This year we're not using student body because of your time constraints. We're not using improvement council because of time constraints. We'll reintroduce that next year. Okay, and then let's look at the process. So we've done several things so far. You've really got a good start, and Tina's been briefing us weekly on how all of our schools are doing, and we're hearing very, very good reports from her. What we've done so far is we've created your organizational structure, you've got your steering team, you've delegated tasks, and you've collected a bunch of data. Then we did all together the introduction, and then last month you worked on visioning, and that was really your first discussion as a council. Very important discussion, especially we're going to go back and pull from the achievement data that's in your vision statement. That'll become part of today's process as well. Okay, and so today, right now, here's what you have. The same things as last month, except now we've added the vision statement to the list of products. And we asked you to bring a copy of your vision statement with you to today's webinar, so that as we're talking about achievement data, we want you to remember what your vision data was in your vision statement, which was, for many of you, that 100% of your students would succeed at a high level. Okay, so today we're going to talk about goals and two levels of goals. One, your priority areas for improvement, your PAIs, and then two, your SMART goals. And then just looking forward, once we know what your goals are, then we'll start to explain what's getting in the way of reaching those goals. Those are your root causes. Our online system actually makes it impossible for you to enter a root cause until you've got your goals approved by us, because your root causes are specific to your goals. So you cannot go on in our process until you've got your goal statement written and they're approved by us. Then we'll go to root causes. Why aren't we achieving those goals? Then we'll go to interventions, and then we'll go to that preparation step so that the interventions are ready to go at the beginning of next school year. So, okay, so, quick overview of the process, and now let's look at goals. So, a couple of things. Again, I mentioned we aligned our terminology with the Indiana Department of Education's terminology. We've always had these things. We called them broad goals and specific goals, or targeted goals in the past, and we've just changed the wording so that it's easier for you to have conversations with DOE. So there are priority areas for improvement. These are very general areas. They're very, very broad. And to be honest, they don't really lend themselves well to school improvement planning because they're too broad. Once we go on in the process, we want to know specifically what are we trying to improve. And so after this point, we'll always be talking about SMART goals. But we'll group those SMART goals into these broader areas. So I guess the thing to remember here is that we've got two different levels of goals. The broad kind of focus areas are your PAIs, and then your SMART goals will fall under your PAIs. Okay, so let's talk about those broad areas first, your PAIs, and let's really make sure that you understand what those are. That's the first thing you're going to come up with when you start doing your goal setting. So again, I would think of these as broad areas of focus. So when you get into the online system, when you enter these, it will be, you'll just be checking a bunch of boxes. So when you enter your PAIs, the first question you're going to have is, what's the focus of these PAIs? And you'll say it's either going to be student proficiency, or in other words, your pass rate on ISTEP or end of course assessment, or it's going to be student growth, the percentage of students that are growing at the prescribed rate, or the focus will be on graduation or on career ready. I'll define these in a minute, and this terminology is all established by the Department of Education. And the reason we're so fine-tuned in terms of just doing check boxes here in this section is that later, when we create your school improvement plan and your student achievement plan for the Department of Ed, we're actually going to draw information from what you've entered here to put into your school improvement plan. So we want to make sure that it's going into our system in a way that we can get it out so that it will make sense to DOE. So, and again, I suppose it's not really important for you to really understand all of that, but we just want you to we want you to know the care that we've taken to make sure that the reports that are eventually going to come out will be things that the Department of Ed can understand. Okay, so you're going to say, okay, here's the focus of our PAI, or here's our broad area. Here's the subject area that this PAI is going to relate to. In the department's terms, math, English, English 10, and Algebra 1. We also include other subjects because while the department talks about those 4 areas, you may decide you want to have a PAI around social studies, or around biology, or subject or world languages, something other than the 4 that the department has described. So we do give you a chance to go a little broader than what the department has described here in case you also want to address those areas in your school. So then there will be a checklist where you'll say, okay, this is a broad focus area that we have for 9th grade or 3rd grade or whatever. And then the department asks you to identify a subgroup, and this is how the department identifies subgroups in their PAIs. So you'll say this is a broad area of improvement that we'd like to focus on for the kids in the bottom 25% of our class academically, of our school, or the student group, or the top 75%. Or in a high school, we're focusing on student proficiency in math, and we are focusing on seeing improvements between the 8th grade assessment and the 10th grade assessment, or the 10th grade assessment and the 12th grade assessment. So different subgroups depending on what school you're in. And again, the focus of this is all to align with the Department of Ed, but also to help you think about these broad areas for improvement. So, okay. So here's definitions. When we talk about proficiency, we're talking about the percentage of students who pass ISTEP or ECA. When we talk about student growth, we're talking about the percentage of students who make the expected gains on ISTEP or ECA. We're going to increase that. Graduation rate is the percentage of the graduation cohort who graduate in 4 years. And career ready means the percentage of graduates who pass an IB test, an AP test, an IB exam, or who earn 3 college credits or pass an industry certification exam. So that's what we're looking at in terms of defining those terms. Okay, so that's the PAIs, and here's some examples. So if you're in elementary school, one of your PAIs might sound like this. You'd be saying, Our broad area for improvement is to improve student proficiency or pass rate on I-STEP math of our 6th graders, and we're specifically focusing on the kids in the bottom 25%. So that would be one PAI, very broad. We don't know, where the issues are in math. We do know it's 6th grade. We know we're working on the low achieving students, but we're not really focused in yet on how we're going to, specifically what we're going to improve. It's still a broad area. Here's a high school example. Again, I'm working on student proficiency or pass rate on the Algebra 1 and of course assessment. My grade level is the class of 2018 or whatever. And then my subgroup is I'm working to improve the percentage between 8th grade and to increase that to 10th grade. So these are our broad areas. Then remember that underneath each one of these PAIs, then there will be specific goals. And the specific goals will say, our PAI is for Algebra 1, but specifically we're working on this standard. Or specifically we have an in-house assessment that we give every 2 weeks in algebra, and we're wanting to see some improvements on that. So we'll get down specific into when we get to the SMART goals. Okay, so now let's talk about the SMART goals. So SMART goals are what it's all about. We focus, we want those broad goals, but in terms of driving student achievement, it's the SMART goals that drive your student achievement. So reminder, your SMART goals are going to fall under one of those broad areas. That's kind of the organizational structure for your goals. Okay, so our SMART goal format, which also meets all of the department's requirements for SMART goals. But this is a format we've been using for like 20 years. It just so happened that it very nicely worked out that the department was in alignment with what we do already. Okay. So when you're defining a SMART goal, when you report a SMART goal for us, we're looking for these 4 things, and in the online system it will prompt you to enter these. So the first thing it'll say is what group of students are you trying to improve? So you might say it's all students. We want to have a goal that is that all students are going to, in the whole building, are going to improve in this area. Or, more likely, you're going to narrow it down a little bit there. So you're going to say it's a specific student group. It's just 3rd graders, or it's just your free and reduced lunch students, or it's boys that you're working on, or it's Hispanic students. So you're looking for, is it all kids that really are struggling with this achievement goal, or is it a specific group? So you might have, free and reduced lunch or whatever. The thing that's so important about that is if we can really tune in on a specific student group, then later when you're trying to explain why students aren't achieving at the desired level, and even more importantly when you get to interventions, you'll be able to fine-tune and hone in those interventions so that they really will pull from the student group. For example, if you're doing something in reading and you realize that your boys read at a lower level than your girls, then maybe all of your reading selections in your intervention are going to be, selections that would appeal to boys in subject area. So, so we really want to fine-tune the student group. Then the next question is exactly what do you want those kids to do? That's the benchmark. We want them to master's ratio. We want them to pass the local quarterly on-track test that we've developed and we give to students, every 2 weeks to see how they're doing. We are working on our graduation as our PAI, so we want to check at the end of 9th grade. So our student group might be 9th graders, and we want to check how many Core 40 credits do they have at the end of 9th grade. We're working on driving that data. So our benchmark is something, of course, that's measurable. It's something that's academic based. It's not attendance, it's not discipline referrals, it's academic based, and it's measurable. Then, also in your SMART goal, we're going to put data to it. So we want to know what's your baseline data. What was the data last year in this area? What was the data the year before that, the year before that? So we've got kind of a baseline, and if we can, we'd like to see some trend data in that baseline by looking at data for several years. Then we want to know what's your target data. So the target data would be where are you going to be a year from now. And then a year from now, we'll do follow-up data and we'll see, did we hit the target? That's always the goal. Get a meaningful target, one that's not too big, one that's not too small, and then did we hit that goal, hit that target? In terms of time frame, our time frames in SI2 is always 1 year. We always want to know where are we going to be a year from now. So anytime we talk about follow-up data, it will always be data that's 1 year out. We have found that in terms of planning that's just works the best because it's very concrete. It's not like, oh, 5 years from now we might be here. No, we want to know 1 year from now where you're going to be. So you've got to think real carefully about that and kind of think, we want that target to be not overwhelming. If it's too big, everybody kind of just gives up, but if it's too small, then you don't feel like you've accomplished anything when you get there. So over the years, and sometimes this takes two or 3 years of working with us, you'll get very sophisticated about setting targets, and there'll be targets that you can reach if you work your tails off. That's where we always want that target to be. If I work really hard, what can I get? And man, when you get there, you're going to feel so good. It's just a great feeling to know that you worked hard, and as a result, the kids got up to this point. That's really cool. So that's our format. And again, once you get to into the online system is going to prompt you to think about these things and enter them, as will the discussions that we have today. Okay, here's some examples. So let's say these are elementary examples. In the first one there, if you look at the top here, it says the PAI is that we want to impact the proficiency rate or the pass rate in math, and we're specifically working with the kids in the bottom 25%. So it's a little bit broad. We don't know, where we're going in math. There's a lot of things that could be getting in the way in terms of math achievement. So now we want to narrow down this PAI into SMART goals. So we've got one PAI, but this school has come up with 4 different SMART goals. When they looked at their data, one of the things that they discovered is that their issue was with 6th graders. And you'll notice that in all of the student groups, they're focusing on 6th grade. So let's see what they came up with. They said they wanted to, these are their SMART goals. They wanted to increase the percentage of 6th graders in the bottom 25% who pass I-STEP math. Still kind of broad with that. We've narrowed it down a little bit. Then they said, let's narrow it down even farther. They're going to increase the percentage of all 6th graders who master algebra and functions. So that is the specific standard that their students were struggling with. We'll really encourage you to go down to the standard level to really dig into that standards data to see, where are we not hitting it. And then later your root causes and your interventions will focus on that standard. So, and then this is a school that does have a weekly assessment, and so they have also said that they want to increase the percentage of 6th graders in the bottom 25% who earn a 90% on the weekly math test. And then as they were further looking, they discovered that they had an issue with their maybe an achievement gap with their free and reduced lunch kids. So they said in addition to having all 6th graders in the bottom 25% earn a 90% or better, they want to make sure that they're also focusing on the 6th graders in the free and reduced students in the bottom 25% who earn a 90% on the weekly math test. Later, when we get into root causes and interventions, having this free and reduced identified will make you think about your interventions differently. Just a quick example, we had one school that they had, let's say they had goals that were similar, SMART goals that were similar to these, and they were implementing an after-school tutoring program in math. And when they started to focus then on their free and reduced students, they started noticing that the free and reduced lunch kids were never staying after school for their math tutoring, and they came to realize that the free and reduced lunch kids had to go home to babysit for their younger siblings because their parents were working, a couple of jobs. So, so putting these specific student groups into your SMART goals will later cause you to look at your interventions a little differently. So again, we want these to be very specific, and then we also, want to fine-tune them as much as we can. Okay, so here's another one. Here's another example. This example is looking at the student growth. So we're looking at the percentage of students who make expected gains on I-STEP. In math, the bottom 25%. And this time we're going to look at the data and have two different kinds of SMART goals, two different types of student groups. In the first one, we're looking at all sixth graders in the bottom 25%, and we're looking at them showing high growth. So what that means is that year after year after year after year, I'm going to look at my sixth graders, and I'm going to say, how does my sixth grade achievement growth compare this year to last year, and how does my sixth grade achievement in growth compare to next year, and I'll set a goal for my sixth graders. So I'm always comparing one sixth grade to the next sixth grade. But on the bottom one here, where it says to increase the percentage of the class of 2000 and something in the bottom 25% that show high growth. In this case, instead of looking at sixth grade compared to sixth grade compared to sixth grade, we're going to look at one group of students, and we may start with them as third graders. So maybe it's the class, I don't know what that would be, the class of 2020 something. We'll start with them as third graders, and then we'll say what kind of growth are they going to do, and we'll project out a data target. And then that same group of students that we started with as third graders, now we're going to look at them as fourth graders, and the next year we'll look at them as fifth graders. So anytime we see a student group as the class of something, what we're meaning there is that we're taking the same students and we're looking at them from third grade to fourth grade to fifth grade. If we see a grade level here, that means we're comparing sixth grade to sixth grade to sixth grade. So you might ask, well, why would I want to have two different types of data? Well, if I'm the sixth grade teacher, I'm going to be wanting to see how do my students, my sixth graders this year, compared to my sixth graders last year. And I'm going to project out, this is where I want my sixth graders to be a year from now. If all of my interventions are just going to be focused on sixth grade, and there are different interventions that I used last year, I maybe want to look at sixth grade compared to sixth grade. We find a lot of schools, though, like to look at vertical data, and that's really very interesting. One of our highest achieving elementary schools, they decided that they didn't have the time or energy to look at all kids, all grade levels all at once. They made a conscious decision that their school improvement was going to be a 6-year process. They started out with their first graders, and they implemented all kinds of stuff for their first graders, and then they followed that class through all 6 years. And then each year they did first grade, they revamped their first grade, and then the next year they kept the first grade revamp interventions, and then they added second grade on, and then the next year they added third grade intervention changes on. So it took 6 years, but they redesigned that school top to bottom, but they did it at a very manageable pace. So yeah, so something to think about as you look at goals. When you're looking at your student groups, you'll be wanting to think about, am I going to compare sixth grade to sixth grade to sixth grade, or do I want to start with one class and look at that vertical comparison where I'm going, third to fourth to fifth to sixth grade. Okay, so there's some elementary examples. Here's some high school examples. This might be a PAI. The broad area is to look at proficiency in Algebra 1, so the pass rate in the Algebra 1 end of course assessment. I'm going to increase the percentage of the class of 2000 and whatever who master quadratic equations. There I've taken it down to the standard level. Class of, whatever, who earn 90% in the weekly math test. We really like, and Tina, when you work with her, she's a big fan. Matter of fact, she's at her school 20 years ago. They were the first ones that we were aware of in Indiana that did these ongoing assessments in the classroom to monitor what students were mastering. So I know she'll talk with you heavily about that. Yeah, so that's a high school example on college and career ready in math. This would be that they're going to complete one of the 4 college ready tasks. So it would be, the percentage of students who have succeeded on an AP test, an IB exam, and the SAT. So they've done one of those things. So this time we're going to look at the percentage of graduates who pass the AP Calc test, for example, whatever you're focusing on. One thing I do want to caution the high schools with, we've done a lot of work for Lumina on APIB and dual credit. And one mistake that schools often make is they'll express this data as the percentage of students enrolled in the course who pass an AP Calc test. And we strongly encourage you not to do that and instead express the data as the percentage of graduates. That way, if you don't do that, a student who never took the course doesn't end up in the denominator. And if you report it just as the kids who enrolled in the course, it actually kind of sugarcoats the data. Kids who don't enroll in the course also didn't pass the test. So we think you really need to put the graduates in the denominator rather than students enrolled in the course. So if you have questions about that, contact us and we can kind of talk you through that some more. So, okay, so just a couple of high school examples. Okay, so that's the introduction. I think the big things to remember is that you've got PAIs, or these broad goals, but then what we're really focusing on is those SMART goals, the very specific and concrete places where you want to see improvement. You've narrowed it down to a specific student group and a specific standard, something very narrow, and those are your SMART goals. The SMART goals fall underneath the PAIs, and it's the SMART goals that are going to, we think, make or break your improvement. So, okay, so we're into the next step then. So after this webinar, you'll want to decide, are we going to have this discussion? How are we going to do this discussion, and where are we going to do the different parts of it? So a couple things before you have the discussion is we want to make sure that your vision statement is finished. So you'll want to check your vision statement, make sure that that's all done. You should not go on to this step until your vision is done. We find that the vision and the loftiness of your vision will really have an influence on your goals. So don't go on to goal step until your vision is done, especially that part that asks in your dreams what percentage of students are achieving at the high level. So then the other thing that you'll need to do is to check your achievement data report, because there's no use of looking at that report until all the data is in there. So we know a lot of you, probably most of you, have finished up entering all that data in. The deadline was past due for that, but we also know that for whatever reason some of you are just finishing that up and haven't quite finished it up yet. So, but you don't want to go into this discussion until you have that achievement data report all complete. So is all of your data entered, and you might kind of eyeball it before you have people look at it and just say, does it kind of looks like, are there any mistakes that we're seeing here, before you really dig into it. Also, this might be a really good time to thank your achievement data point person. They have been working their tails off to get all that data in. And if you're that person on behalf of ASA, thank you. We know how much work that is, and we know that you probably didn't get any extra pay or time off or whatever for getting all that data into the system. The good news is that after this month, your work is pretty much complete. You've done your part to make school improvement happen until we do this again, a year from now. But thank you for entering all of that data. It's what makes this process work. And again, if you're not that achievement data point person, please thank the person that put that data in, because that was a ton of work. So, okay, so you've got your vision statement ready, you've got your achievement data report ready. So here's the 4 steps we've talked about. The first step is individual reflection. Second step is the initial group discussion. Third step is to decide as a group on your PAIs, and then the 4th step is decided as a group on your SMART goals. Okay, so the individual reflection. So we would suggest that if you're going to do this right now, just everybody go down to the library or the teacher's workroom or whatever, take that data report with you and just review the data and then answer these discussions. I am pleased that, and as you look through the data, what I would do is just put a plus sign next to any data that you thought, wow, we're pretty good there. And then if there's data that concerns you and you think, oh my gosh, look at that, then put a minus sign or a circle or something. And then as you're starting to look at the data, I think you'll start to see some achievement gaps. Some of you will have achievement gaps between your paid lunch students and your free and reduced lunch students. Others might see them between boys and girls, or your Hispanic students and your white students. You know, you'll start to see some gaps, and you'll want to kind of tag those two. So everybody's looking at the data by themselves and kind of seeing, you know, what are the stories in the data. When you're looking at data, you're just looking for stories. What are the stories in this data? Okay, so when you see our data, it's going to look like this. So I just want to kind of point this out. The first thing you're going to see is that we give you the data source, and we'll tell you if we auto-populated the data. So for state testing, we did put that data in for you. So the data source is DOE's website. And then here's the data that you're looking at. All students passing I-STEP math. We've given you 3 years of historical data, so you can kind of see for this school, this is a real school's data. They've been seeing an upward trend in that. That's good. And so that might be something that you'd put a plus sign on. Man, 89%. That's not bad. So we're looking at all of these. We're seeing upward trends here. Ooh, that's good. So you might be looking at all these and you might say, ooh, but look at biology, it's a little bit lower. That's maybe something you want to put a negative sign in, that's something that you're a little bit concerned about. So what pleases you, what disturbs you, and then this slide that we're looking at right now does not have any achievement gap data in it, but later you'll be looking at some of that too. So we've got your data source, we've got the student group, we've got the benchmark, and then we've got the historical data or your baseline data. Okay, now here are, I just want to go over these very quickly. These are all the data charts you're going to see. It's quite rich. We used to have a ton more, and we basically went through several years ago and we took out everything that we didn't think was absolutely imperative for schools to look at. So even though there are a lot of charts, we've left in only the things that we think it's really important to look at. So a couple things I want to point out here. Big picture data. The percentage of students, of all students who pass I-STEP, that in terms of school improvement data is pretty worthless data because it's so broad it doesn't focus anything that you do. Schools are asked by the state to have this big picture data, the percentage of all students who pass I-STEP math, because it gives a snapshot of the academic health of your school. So it's good data to have. It lets the State Department, it lets your school board, it lets your parents know what is, in general sense, the academic health of your school. But in terms of school improvement planning, this big picture data doesn't help a lot because it doesn't tell you where to focus. So after this big picture, we'll start to give you some drill down reports. So we'll go back to the state testing and we'll say, okay, let's drill down a little bit. In terms of I-STEP math, how did the school do at each grade level? Is there something specific there, a problem area? Lunch program status. Are your paid lunch students achieving at a higher level than your free and reduced lunch? English language proficiency, special education. We'll look at all of these areas to kind of start to target in on your SMART goals. Then, and this was also auto-populated. On state testing for standards, this is even a bigger area, specifically which standards are your students not mastering. This is data that your achievement point person had to enter in. Unfortunately, DOE doesn't publish that data publicly, so we're not able to grab it and put it into your system for you. Then another thing that we'd like you to look at that is, I think, very different, we've never seen anybody else do it, and we think it's really important, is we want you to look at data that would help you to analyze the integrity of your report cards. So what we've asked you to do is, and your achievement data point person has already done this, we've asked them with your help to identify your report card mastery grade. So that's the grade that, from your perception, if a student's earned that grade on the report card, then you would pretty much expect that they would pass I-STEP or they would pass the end of course assessment. So for some schools, they feel like their mastery grades are C. If a student gets a C on the report cards, they're doing okay and they should probably pass I-STEP and ECA. For some schools it's a B. You know, they're really saying if you really want to be passing a high step in ECA, you better be getting B's on your report cards. For some schools it's an A. So I think, for most of our schools it's probably a B. And that's kind of a heads up for parents, because a lot of parents think that if their kids are getting C's, it's okay because that's average. But for most schools, that's not okay. If we're going to pass I-STEP and ECA, those report card grades need to be B's. So we want you to have that discussion. Later, we're going to compare the percentage of students who earn that mastery grade to the percentage of students who actually passed I-STEP or ECA. So we're going to kind of do some analysis with that data later. So that's mastery grade data. We wanted to make sure that you were aware of what that meant. And then also, in terms of report card integrity, we also want to look at your promotion rate. A lot of times we have, that's another comparison we'll do. We have schools that have 100% of the kids get promoted to the next grade level, and yet, only 80% of them are passing I-STEP or ECA. So, or 100% of the kids are earning credit on the report card for, Algebra 1, yeah, they're getting that promote, I guess not really promotion, but they're, everything looks fine, and then when we look at the pass rate, it's really not fine. So we'll use this data to help you have some discussions later when we get into root causes. And again, we want to make sure that your report cards are saying what you intend for them to be saying, and the report cards are understood by parents the way that you mean for them to be understood. So, okay. And then also in data charts, in middle school, we'll be looking at the percentage of high school students, or of middle school students who are in high school credit. And then in high schools, we have all kinds of additional data that we'll have you look at. A couple I wanted to point out here on Core 40 progress. We find a lot of schools have a lot of students that start on Core 40, and we have a high percentage of students who drop out of the Core 40 track after 10th grade. So we want you to kind of be looking at that. When students come into your high school, do they continue to earn the Core 40 credits that they would need to in order to be able to end up with the Core 40 diploma instead of the general diploma? So we'll look at that. We'll look at AP potential. That's another thing when we get to root causes. We find that in many schools there's a lot of kids who, based on the PSAT test, had the potential for doing very well in AP, and yet the school doesn't offer any AP classes. So that's data we'll look at as well. And then math is such a gatekeeper course. We're going to ask you specifically in high schools to look at some of your math classes that are in the sequence of math that leads to success in math in post-secondary and careers, and we'll ask you to be looking at the pass rate in those courses. So, and then the last type of data tables, this was optional, but some of you also study things in your buildings like DIBELS or NAEP or Terra Nova, or a school-created assessment. We had one school, they had a Panther Pride test. So you've got that data to look at as well. So this is very data-rich, and it's really worth your time to roll up your sleeves and dig into that data. Okay. This is, want to go back to the mastery data. This is what it looks like when you see that mastery data. At the top, your achievement data point person typed in here how your school defined the mastery grade. And then I also wanted on this slide to look at the disaggregated data. So this is how we report your disaggregated data. So the first thing you're going to see is all students. Then there's the gender disaggregation. Then there's the race ethnicity disaggregation, the free and reduced lunch, the non-limited English and limited English speaking students, and then special ed or general ed. So, okay, so I'm going to leave this slide up and give you like 30 seconds to just look at this data. Let's just look at the most recent data over here in the right-hand column. And remember those three questions: what pleases you, what disturbs you, and where do you see achievement gaps? And specifically, since we're talking about disaggregated data, where do you see achievement gaps in this data? I'm going to count to 30, give you a chance to look. Okay, so one of the things and this is a real school's data. One of the things that you've looked at is in terms of mastery grades for 6th graders in English, which was what this data chart was about. Here's the title. You can see that the females have much higher percentage of students earning the mastery grade. So when we get to root causes, the question is going to be, why is that? And then when we get to interventions, what are we going to do about it? Okay, in the next step, in the next section here, we're looking at free reduced versus paid lunch. And you can see that, again, our paid lunch students are earning the mastery grade at a much higher rate than our free and reduced. Why is that? You know, our basic premise is that all students can achieve. So if our paid lunch students are earning that mastery grade at a higher level, what's up with that? When we get to root cause analysis, we'll work to explain that, and then when we get to intervention, we'll work at fixing it. Okay, so those are just a couple of examples, and you can see that data just begs you, if you care about all kids, that data just begs you to do something about it. So even, I mean, I've looked at the slide a million times, and I'm going, oh my gosh, 68% versus 90, they got to get in there. So, okay, so that's the disaggregated data. Okay, so let me get some of these things out of the way on my slide. Okay, so in terms of suggested terminology, when we're looking at disaggregated data, we always like to say that we always like to kind of soften the statements that we're making. So we might say that that this data, the boys and their peers or girls may be experiencing an achievement gap. So we'll always say maybe. So, and the reason we do that is that we don't know if the gaps are real or if they're due in some, possibly because of some bias in the assessment or whatever. So we'll always soften our statements there a little bit. And then also, when we make a statement like that, we always want to back it up with data to explain why we're saying that. And again, our foundational belief is that all students can learn. When we see a gap, it doesn't mean that girls are smarter than boys. It means that for some reason we're not engaging boys at the same way that we do girls. Okay, so we kind of talked about these things. Yep, we covered that. So, so in terms of how you would express, I am concerned that 68% of 6th graders are earning the master grade C in English. And then the other example, oops, I am concerned that an achievement gap may exist between boys and girls, and then here's the data that made me think that. Okay, so you're looking at all that data individually. Now we're coming back to small group. Which data points disturb you? Which data points please you? And did you see any gaps? And typically when you see gaps, you're going to see gaps all the way through. It won't be just one subject. It won't just be just one standard. It'll be kind of all the way through that the girls are out achieving the boys, or your paid lunch kids are out achieving the free and reduced lunch kids. So, okay. So then so the second step, I'm going to go back. Second step is initial group discussions. We're just kind of talking about it. And now the third step is we're getting concrete. Okay, what should be our PAIs? Let's design our first PAI. What's the focus group? Oh, proficiency. What's the subject area? Math. What's the grade level? 9th grade or 5th grade. And then what subgroups? Bottom 25%. So we're defining those PAIs. Then do all the PAIs first, and then go back to your first PAI and say, okay, for this PEI, we're concerned that our 3rd graders, you know, in the bottom 25% are not doing well in math. After we've got that PAI written, then we're going to come and do our SMART goals. So the SMART goals are going to be those specific targets, narrow targets underneath the PAIs. So this just takes some rolling up your sleeves, get out a flip chart, and just start kind of playing with what would those broad areas be, and then what would the specific targets be under those. In your current school improvement plan, if you've got achievement goals there that you want to bring forward, that would be fine. as long as they're still really goals for you. And but we'll want to fit them into this format. What's the broad PAI, and then what's the specific target underneath. Okay, and finally, we wanted to point this out to you. Remember when you entered the SIP School Improvement Plan uses, you checked off if you were focus school or priority school, if you're a Title I school, if you wanted to use your school improvement plan to meet state regulations. Every time you did that, we customized, the system customized for you. And this is an area that's very customized. So every school is going to have a different set of rubrics here in this area. We want to make sure that you've read it very carefully. And for example, if you are a Targeted 1 Targeted Assistance School, if you're a Title I task school, you're going to have this rubric item. At least one SMART goal addresses the Title I targeted students. If you're not a task school, this will not appear in your rubric. If you are let's see, where's another, if you're a school-wide school in title, you're going to get this rubric item. So again, we want to make sure that you've read these rubric items because they're very specific to your school, and we need to make sure that at least one of your SMART goals addresses these things. And then just general things, each PAI is supported by one or more appropriate SMART goals. A grade level or class has been identified for the SMART goals, and the system will work you through this. Student group demographics have been identified for each SMART goal. For example, all students is perfectly fine. Free and reduced lunch kids, third graders. A narrow targeted benchmark is included for each of the SMART goals. We've got historical data, and then we start going down into the specialized ones depending on who your school is. And then finally, and this is kind of a judgment call on our part, but we're looking at collectively, do the SMART goals seem to be manageable within the school's time and energy constraints? So sometimes schools get way maybe over-enthusiastic at this point, and they'll have 4 gazillion SMART goals, and we'll think, oh my gosh, there's no way. What we want to make sure you do is to not stretch yourself so thin that nothing happens very well. So Tina may call you and say, you know, you have 4 million SMART goals. Have you really thought about this? Are you really sure you have the time and energy? We're not going to tell you to take them out, but we're going to kind of push a little bit if we think you're overextending yourself. On the other hand, you know, sometimes we have schools that underextend, that don't push themselves enough, and Tina may call and say, you know, we see this one SMART goal, but we think maybe you might want to do another one because that one SMART goal by itself may not really impact that PAI. So we're going to kind of push you to think about, you know, putting in another SMART goal. Do you have the time to add another 2 or 3? So again, this is highly individualized. We will never force you to do anything here, but we may push a little bit and question and have a discussion with you about this. The other thing that I think we do very, very well, especially Tina does very well, is we'll also push you to make sure that those SMART goals are narrow and specific. If you don't have any SMART goals at the standards level, we'll probably call and say, you know, have you looked at your standards? And we'll look at your standards. So we'll say, have you noticed that this one standard is so much lower than the others? You know, maybe you should think about doing something about that standard. So, so Tina really rolls up her sleeves and looks at your data, and we'll be nudging and coaching and questioning as you go. This is another place where it's very okay for you to call Tina and say, here's what we're thinking, what do you think? You know, so use her there. Okay, and that's it. I want to quickly show you, how to get things online, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, when I'm looking at how to get things online, I'm looking at going down to achievement goals. So we're participating in the webinar. This webinar will be linked right here. Then review the vision statement, review the achievement data report. Here's links to those. Conduct the steering team discussion, which is what this webinar was teaching how to do. Next part's very important. In order for you to enter a discussion, a summary of the discussion, we need you to open the discussion in our system. So when you just get to this step, it's open discussion 3. You're going to click on this button oh shoot, this is already open for my demo high school. What this will be is there'll be a page here, and there'll be two options. One will be to have the discussion online. You're not going to do that because we're not using a console. You'll scroll down to the bottom, and it will say, are you going to have this discussion face-to-face? You'll say yes. It'll say, you know, when is this going to happen? You'll put a date in here, and you'll click open the discussion. Okay, when you do that, the folks on you will be opening the discussion. So, and again, when you get, I'm sorry I can't show you this, but call Tina if you have any questions. Just remember that the part that you want is to open the face-to-face discussion. We're not doing an online discussion because we don't have a console. It's face-to-face, and you're going to scroll down to the very bottom here and click that. Okay, so after you've done that, then that will make where did I open the discussion? That will allow you to enter the summary discussion, a summary of the discussion. So basically you're just going to put in here who wrote the discussion, what date did you have the discussion on, what pleased people, what concerned them. You can do this with bullets, use dashes or asterisks for your bullets, and what possible achievement gaps, and then anything else you want to report. We read these reports very, very closely. This is what helps us to understand what's going on in your school. So, okay. So then we're going to enter the priority areas for improvement. I'm going to click on that. So, and you can see here it's just a checklist. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to add a new priority area for improvement. And I'm going in and clicking the focus area. So I would just say student proficiency, what subject, you know, what grade levels, what's the subgroup or improvement focus area, and then rationale. Why did you pick this as a PAI? And then this is where you'll tell us. There's this is again where the external expectations go, and you'll say, okay, this PAI aligns with English Language Arts, and this PAI is for graduation rate. This part of the system is also customized, so this may look different school to school. So, okay, so that's how you establish, and then down at the bottom you save that. That's how you establish your PAI. It's very easy. And then SMART goals. I'm going to enter my SMART goals, and I'm going to add and you'll notice that I have one PAI. I'm getting a notice. I have one PAI. If you have multiple PAIs, which you would, you'll have tabs up here. And you can see for my first PAI, which is the student proficiency rate for Algebra 1, 9th graders in the bottom 25% of the bottom 25%, I already have one SMART goal that I entered previously. I'm just going to add a SMART goal for this PAI. And again, it prompts you, is this going to be a grade level SMART goal or a class SMART goal? What are the demographics of the student group? Is it all students, or is it, if I click all students, then the segregation disappears? What's the benchmark? You know, what do we want them to do? What's my historical data? What's my data target? And again, we'd like those to be a year out. What's my vision data? Well, ideally, I wanted 100% of the kids to do this. And then what's the external expectations? And again, this is customized. We need to make sure that at least one of your SMART goals addresses, you know, these different things. So this will be different for each school. And then you'll save that. Okay. Then so you enter that, and then go up to your next PAI, enter its SMART goals, the next PAI, enter those SMART goals. Okay, so that's entering your SMART goals. Then we've given you a report where you can review your PAIs and SMART goals. So that's just list your PAI, and then the SMART goals underneath that PAI. We kind of give you everything you entered there into a report. Make sure it's how you want it. Then this is probably not set up for demo school, but we've given you a customized list of all the expectations for your school and the goals that you put in to meet those expectations. So, so the external expectation is here. So for, I guess there is one in for demo high school. The external expectation is because Title I, I have to have students not meeting AMO student group. That has to be a SMART goal, and then here's the SMART goal that I've put in that's going to meet that expectation. So we'll list all the external expectations that have come out of state rules and regulations, and then we need to make sure that there's at least one SMART goal that's done that. So again, that's something that Tina can help you with when you get to that part, but it's pretty self-explanatory as well. You just need to make sure that you've met those external expectations. And then, maybe you haven't met an external expectation, so we're going to put in we're going to edit your SMART goals. So I just click on that. That takes you back to, this part, and I can add a SMART goal. Okay. Okay, and then there's the rubric items. Okay, I know I'm 5 minutes over, which we always try to finish on time, but we are going to finish in 30 seconds. So, okay. So the tasks then that we're doing is we're entering two things, your PAIs and your SMART goals. Your SMART goals will be aligned with your PAIs. They'll fall under your PAIs. Okay? Deadline is June 20th. We're all we know that the schools are taking the month of July off, so we want to give you that month off. So you finish up by June 20th. That gives Tina a week or so to review your work and ask you to make any revisions. In an email, in the last monthly update that we sent out, we gave you, for the rest of our work together, kind of our timeline and when we're suggesting to you that you have your discussions. So hopefully you already have this discussion scheduled on your calendars, and we can get this work done and into us by June 20th. And as always, don't forget to call Tina. We know that this is a huge step. It's also a really important step. If you don't have good goals, everything else that follows, it really is meaningless. So we've got to have these goals done well, and we will coach you heavily here. If Tina starts asking you a lot of questions and giving you a lot of suggestions, please don't take offense. We're wanting to, just like a basketball coach watches to see how his players are making layups and may give them some tips on form and stuff. That's what we're doing. We're coaching and mentoring, and we're kind of looking over your shoulder and making sure that everything's going well. One last thing, and then I will finish. In the online system, you'll notice in your systems, when you get down to the next steps, this is all orange and none of these links are hot. Because everything is based on your goals, we have disabled the rest of the system until your goals are approved. As soon as we've approved your goals, your SMART goals, then all this will become live. But right now you can't work ahead because we want to make sure you've got good goals written before we go on to do the next steps. Okay, Tina, I'm going to jump in here. Questions that people have typed in. Is there anything I need to address?
One question, and it has to do with the ASA root cause survey questions. A little bit of confusion. The question is, do the written student standards on guidance exist in your school? I'm not sure that a lot of schools are aware of if they have written student standards on guidance.
Okay.
Where could they find this?
Yeah, good question. So in school counseling, and counselors, I think this is something that's near and dear to your hearts. As a former school counselor, I can say, in school counseling, counselors have student standards just like we have for math and English and science and social studies. In school counseling, there are three subject areas, if you will. One is academic development, one's career development, and one's personal social development. And there are knowledge and skills that we want students to develop at each grade level, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. And so school counselors have a curriculum that they implement either by meeting with students in classrooms or pulling students out to meet with all of them one-on-one. But there's things that they want them to learn how to do, like they might want all students to know where to ask for extra help, or to have the courage to raise their hand and ask a question in class when they're confused, or to turn their homework in, or to know what to do if they see bullying. So there's standards that school counselors have. A lot of schools have worked on the Indiana Gold Star School Counseling Initiative. That's actually something that we do on the behalf of the Department of Ed. Right now in Indiana, 1 out of every 10 schools is a Gold Star school counseling school. All of the Gold Star schools have standards. If you're not a Gold Star school and your school's not, involved with the National Association or the Indiana School Counselor Association, chances are you don't have standards. But we think it's a really good idea, especially in academic development. School counselors are the ones whose job it is to teach kids how to be engaged at school, to turn in homework, to ask questions, to participate in class discussions, to take rigorous courses. They are really an integral part of school improvement planning. They touch every student in the building. So we're just asking, do you have standards? Are there, skills and knowledge that are written down that your counselors are trying to help all students master? If there aren't, then you might want to ask the question, well, why not? And it may be because you're using your school counselors to do things that have nothing to do with school counseling, like book rental or transcripts or calculating GPAs and things that take them away from kids and parents. So and if that's the case, then that may be part of your school improvement plan to get those non-school counseling tasks away from the counselors so that they have time to implement a school counseling curriculum that's based on standards. So, and again, that's something that's another whole big initiative that we do nationally on that one. We work with schools in 41 states to help with that. So, and I personally, if your counselors are interested, tell them to call me. I'd be happy to talk with them about that. Anything else, Tina?
I think that's all. Just keep submitting those good things and keep calling.
Okay, that sounds great. We've been monitoring. I've been attending all the state board of education meetings, and we're kind of watching what's happening there too. And just make sure. I just want to assure you that if there's anything that we feel applies to you in terms of school improvement planning, we'll put those in the monthly updates. So right now, we just inquired last week again to see if there was anything new that would require schools to use one model and one template for school improvement planning, and we're being told no, that schools will have choice. So we're still hearing the same messages, so that's a good sign. So okay, that sounds good. Thanks everybody, and call Tina, call Tina, call Tina. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a nice day. Bye.